Thank you, Deputy O'Sullivan. I now call on Deputy Smith, who has 9 minutes.
Well, I won't be using all that, but just to say, Gormagot Ceann Comhairle, and we won't be supporting this bill. There is absolutely a need for a bill which addresses hate crime. We've seen attacks on migrants, refugees and people from different religious, racial and ethnic background. So we would welcome a bill that addresses it correctly, but unfortunately this bill is not what we need. I don't want to dwell on whether the bill is workable in an Irish legal context. I don't think I'm fully equipped to do that, but I do note the opinions of others, such as Jennifer Schweppes and Amanda Haynes of the Hate and Hostility Research Group, that this is not suitable and that you cannot simply take an act from Scotland and transpose it here without running legal risks. But I want to concentrate on what's not proposed in the bill. And like others, wordings and categories at risk from hate crime have been pointed out. They're outdated, regardless of how well-meaning they may be. For example, you use the term in the bill for trans people, and would not, or possibly not, the terms in the bill cover Roma, people without documents, refugees or those seeking asylum. The key to the success of a bill dealing with hate crime would be to identify what victim groups we're seeking to protect. And on this key issue, this bill is, to say the least, wanting. So, for example, in the wording on trans people, it does not recognise individuals who face hate crime as a result of their being agender or gender fluid, which would be a far better concept to protect people based on their gender identity and gender expression. But more worrying in an Irish context, as others have referred to, this does not specifically mention travellers, and this is crucial, and I want to concentrate on that for the rest of the time. Rarely a month goes by when we don't witness prejudice against travellers in this country. On many occasions, statements that could encourage discrimination and hate are directed at the traveller community, and often by elected representatives, some in this House and in many county councils up and down the country. So I want to give a few examples. Quote, "You wouldn't want them beside you, and I don't want them beside me," Fianna Fáil councillor Sean McAniff told a local radio station in Donegal. The councillor made a number of remarks about traveller families, ranging from saying that they would wreck houses and branding them as bad eggs. Councillor Tom Skehan referred...
It is not customary to mention names of those outside the House when they are not here to defend themselves. I would ask you to desist from that.
OK. Well, another councillor from Kerry referred to people coming from outside the county who had relocated in Kerry and said they were securing houses over people who had been on the waiting list for a longer time. And he actually mentioned that there were 150 wards. Now, by that he didn't mean electoral areas, he meant the family wards on the county council waiting list. If these and many other comments were directed at any other group, it would be seen as a clear example of hate crime or of encouraging a hate crime. One study of travellers in Britain, because we don't have proper studies of hate directed against travellers here, I'm going to quote that, facts and figures are stark. 9 out of 10 Gypsy and traveller children suffered racial abuse, and 2/3 of children from traveller groups had been bullied and physically attacked in other communities. We don't document or record those incidents here, directed at travellers or others indeed, but we do know, and that is to paraphrase others, that it is the last acceptable form of racism, and it is practised by councillors and TDs across the country. While there is a reference in the bill to race, colour and ethnic origin, it doesn't recognise travellers as a distinct ethnic group, despite travellers campaigning right across the country to have their ethnicity recognised. We still don't do it. But I want to make a wider point on the limitations in the bill. Hate and hostility should, of course, be dealt with, and we are in favour of a category of offence that says where there is an attack, such as a violent or verbal attack on a person, that is motivated based on hate of gender, race or ethnicity or other category, that it should be recognised and should say as a society that we find these attacks intolerable and they should be dealt with. But here's a question for us all here. What about hate and discrimination when the state is the agent of it? If we define hate as hostility, prejudice, bias or hatred, then I believe that this state at all levels, from government to the departments and down to local authorities, in how it operates and deals with travellers, has a case to answer. If hate is not demonstrating the response of the state to the crisis, for example, in traveller accommodation, traveller life expectancy, health outcomes, the education achievements, etc., then I don't know what the definition of hate is. And just to mention a few, the cuts to the traveller accommodation budget have been absolutely appalling. It went from 40 million in 2008 right down to 4 million last year. That's a 90% cut during the period of the recession to traveller accommodation alone. The cuts to traveller education are in the region of 84%, and many of us have seen the impact of this in our own communities. In the discussion in last week's crisis accommodation in Dundalk, we responded to it, and we responded to it after the fire in Carrickmines last year. So we're not supporting this bill as an alternative. Better worded alternatives coming from people who were involved in the very campaigns and the very crimes that this bill says it will address, and it fails to address the issues around anti-traveller sentiment and actions by individuals and indeed by the state and by its bodies.
Thank you, Deputy Smith.